Let's explore the psychology of self-punishment and self-inflicted pain, and its, I guess, its chemistry and the fundamental principles behind it. One of the most, I would say, terrifying and difficult states to process for a human being is trauma, an overwhelming energy that in some ways seems to threaten survival, socially, economically, physically, and a sense of helplessness. So you have trauma and pain, and a helplessness to respond to that trauma and pain, particularly in a traumatically and emotionally illiterate culture, where the need for help that is integral to responding to any trauma. When you're in a traumatic state, you need help. It's worth mentioning at this juncture that what seems traumatic from an adult perspective is not necessarily relevant when dealing with age regression, meaning when you have a traumatic culture that is traumatically illiterate. There are usually at least 10, pockets of energy in any person's life where at a young age there was a traumatic experience. The chemicals that communicated the fight, flight, and freeze flood the body, and rather than being resolved chemically or culturally, the whole pattern is frozen and dissociated. Now, if that happens at age 3 and it does not get resolved in the growing up process, then you have a traumatic charge of energy that can be triggered, that can take one back to age 3. Well, for a 3-year-old, there are any number of things that are highly traumatizing. And so the fact that, for example, getting fired at a job and shouted at or just glared at or just being fired, that's not really that traumatizing to an adult, unless you're at the brink of bankruptcy with medical bills and all of that. But it's way over the top for a 3-year-old to respond to. And so when these pockets of traumatic energy remain in a regressed and unresolved state, they can be triggered, periodically, but they don't actually get resolved without doing, the appropriate traumatic container holding and rituals, etc., capable of resolving them. So we start out usually, in this framework of self-punishment with a combination of severe pain, or at least severe pain for the regressed self that is dealing with it. So we have helplessness and we have severe pain. Now these two things coming together are almost unbearable. The feeling of helplessness, I don't know what to do, I can't solve the problem. This pain feels like it could just go on forever or could keep coming up and I'm trapped. This feeling of helplessness combined with this feeling of intense pain or trauma is literally unbearable. And so what is done here as a coping mechanism, as a response to this helplessness and pain, is first of all a movement from helplessness to control. Now, if we're helpless to stop the actual pain, now this could be someone breaking our heart, someone cheating on us, etc., etc. It could be being lied to, could be, being raped as a child by one's priest, whatever it is. If you have a helplessness to deal with the pain, then in order to create a sense of agency and control, one must create a distraction that one has control over. Now, if you can create a diversion that you have control over and move the attention, it's kind of like the frozen, arrested attention of the ego. It's helpless and it's focused solid on traumatic pain, and it's just, crippling. So if you can divert your attention over to this area where you have control, then from the ego's perspective, you've regained a certain agency. You've just turned the zoom-in lens of the ego onto something, an area that you have control over. The problem is when you are in severe pain, psychologically or physically, there are very few things that can hold your attention in the domain that you have control. For example, if your partner and spouse who you love deeply has just cheated on you, you're not going to be able to hold your attention on the joy of roses. Look at this bouquet of roses. It's just not grabbing enough. You're not going to be able to, think about money necessarily unless you're in absolute crisis. The problem is that pain and fear, fear which is the fear of past pains repeating. All fear is a fear of pain. Pain and the fear of pain are some of the most intense energies that can be, they're very easy to trigger. You just take a gun, and in 1 second you've got the fear of pain. But, trying to get all excited about, a vacation, it's like, oh, don't talk to me about the vacation. I'm in pain right now. And so there are very few things with the gravitational pull on attention that one can take control over that would pull the ego's focus from this devastating area of helplessness to an area of agency, except pain. If you arrest your attention away from the trauma that is kind of being done to you, I mean, you can't really stop your partner from saying that they love someone else more than you, or that you can't really stop your parents saying that they wish you'd never been born, or whatever it is that is hurting you so deeply. But if you take control and, for example, cut yourself, the pain that you're taking control of, it has the gravitational pull, if you'll inflict enough of it, to take your attention away from the pain that you have no control over and into this area where you have control of the pain. Now, you are, of course, adding to the net burden of pain. But because the ego is, in effect, a zoom-in lens, meaning our attention is like a spotlight or a flashlight, and so it's shining over here, then it's shining here, then it's shining here. When it's shining over here, it's not shining over there. It's much like, you can think of the dynamic worldwide. There are starving children right now. There's a 6-year-old little girl being gang raped right now, but not here. And our attention, we're not horrified. Perhaps it would be, a better world if we were, but we are not traumatized by that because it's happening somewhere else. It's not happening, in front of our eyes. Our consciousness is very, very small as individuals. So there's all this stuff happening, both within us and without us. That doesn't bother us. What bothers us is where our attention is focused. And so if I take control of an enormous amount of pain that is helpless, by creating an enormous amount of pain that I have control over. The ego's perspective is that the pain has not gone up, but the helplessness has gone down, which is a correct assessment. Meaning, I'm now focused in an area that I have control, and it's painful. And before, I was in this area that I was helpless and in pain. Now I'm in pain and not helpless. So there is a sense of progress. Now the other dynamic with compulsive pain and most forms of self-punishment, etc., compulsive, is that you have an unknown pain. So your ex is saying some horrible things, and you've no idea what they're going to say next, and they've never said those things before, and no one's done this. So you have an unknown pain, which creates a certain boundarylessness. One, it also creates shock. I didn't think you were going to say that. I had no idea. What? This was happening all along? So you have shock. And you have a sense of boundlessness. When you are shocked and when you are surprised, by definition, the implication is that you cannot predict what's happening. Meaning, if you had predicted that your best friend would sleep with your best friend or something like that, if you had predicted that, you wouldn't have engaged all your feelings and gotten your hopes up and all of this and become attached to futures that will not manifest. You would not have invested in a reality that isn't going to happen psychologically and emotionally. So the very fact that you are surprised informs you that you have a poor filter in that domain, maybe in many domains, which is why it's so unsettling, because every time you're surprised, it's telling you not that reality has suddenly changed and is surprising. What it's telling you is that you lack the imagination, the calibration, the belief structure, the perceptive structure to see that which is surprising you. Like if you said, I had no idea, I thought you were this type of person, and now I see you're this type of person, and I would never in a million years have guessed that. Well, the fact that you didn't guess it in a million years does not mean that that person has changed or that that phenomena is changed. Like the person who invented gunpowder, quite possibly by accident, mixing different chemicals, bringing a flame, and then, maybe it blew up in their face the first time. But what this means is that your map of reality is not complete. It's unreliable. Your map of reality is reliable. Reality does what reality does. But if you didn't see it coming, it means either you didn't have the data system set up to get the information that would let you see it coming, or, even more disturbing, it means you had all the data, but you don't know how to put it together in a way that accurately predicts reality. I had no idea about this. I had no idea about that. I thought we would make millions of dollars, and instead we went bankrupt. What that means is that something didn't fit. The inner map of reality was not a good enough map to represent the outer reality. Otherwise, there are not surprises. People who have a good map of reality are not shocked. They say something like, yeah, I thought that would happen about 30%. I didn't know if it would happen or not, but there seemed a 30% chance that based on the way you treat this person and this person and this person, that you would treat me that way. And I didn't really know if you were going to do that or not. But, it's not a shock, because people don't just suddenly behave in a completely new way out of nowhere. So so there were indicators and I didn't see them. Now, the reason this is such a trauma and is in itself the shock or the surprise of I didn't see it coming can be the biggest trauma of all. And the reason for that is that blind spots that you're blind about cannot be measured well by the person who's blind about them. If you can follow the logic here, if you thought you were going to make millions of dollars on this business, and instead you lost $100,000 in 2 years of your time, my gosh, I thought I would do this, instead this happened. Well, naturally, you must conclude that your map of reality was incomplete. Because if your map of reality was accurate and complete, you would have expected to lose 2 years of your life and $100,000, because that's what happened. You would have at the very least been very cognizant of the probability and say, well, I don't really, and that's, of course, a humble place to be. I don't really know what happened. I know that 7 out of 10 small businesses fail within a matter of years. I know that, 70% of all restaurants don't make it. And, well, I'm starting a restaurant. What are my odds? Well, all things being equal, they're 3 out of 10. And so, oh my gosh, I'm one of the vast majority of restaurants that went out of business. How did that happen? To be surprised, you have to not know that data. I went to Vegas. I bet a lot of money, and I lost. I'm coming home empty-handed. To be surprised about that, you have to not know that if you place 100 bets in Vegas, there's a 98% chance you'll have little or no money left. And if you know that, then you won't be surprised. You have an accurate map of reality. So when you are traumatically hurt and in pain, the implication is your map of reality doesn't work. Now, if that surprises you, then you do not know how big the blind spot is. Because if you say, I have a really big blind spot in relationships, and you know that because you've been wrong about 50 of the last relationships you've been in, then this shouldn't surprise you. You'd say that's consistent with the data. I have a pattern of having, of failing in relationships 50-50, So I'm not surprised. I didn't see it coming, but I'm not surprised that I didn't see it coming because I have a blind spot in that area. But I don't have a blind spot around finances. 90% of the time I make money when I'm doing a job. 50% of the time I am thrown for a loop and fail in some way with relationships. So now you've got a compartmentalized blind spot. But the really devastating trauma is when you don't know yourself well enough to know where your blind spots are or are not, when you don't understand that you have blind spots, and reality crashes into your delusion at such a force that it shatters your delusion that you see things. Now, when that happens, it's completely dissociative and traumatic because you don't know how big it is. Like, you don't know, I thought this was a floor. Gee, if I was wrong about this, maybe the floor is going to come over. Maybe I've just been in a simulation or something. Maybe If my best friend did this, then maybe all my friends. I obviously don't have the software capable of processing the data predictably around me. So how can I say, well, okay, so when you're in shock, you want to reach for something solid. But when the shock is of a nature that destabilizes one's trust in our operating system, then there's no solid place to look, because wherever you hang, that could give way too, because you realize if I was wrong about this, I could be wrong about this. There's a boundarylessness. And that brings in, this dynamic of unknown pain. So I'm in shock. I'm in an area of unknown pain. I don't know how big it is. I don't know where it's going. I don't know where it ends. I don't know what I can and cannot count on. And so this is a really important, part of the trauma and the crisis, what makes it into, an overwhelming crisis that can cascade into self-sabotage, self-punishment, pain infliction, etc. Now, something happens with someone else doing this. And, it can be something as simple as you went for a walk in a forest. You didn't know that there were poisonous spiders. And you saw an interesting spider, you played, and it bit you, and you're convulsing. Well, you didn't have an accurate map of, the spider and stuff. Now, one of the very interesting things that people do in this thing is they say, I'm such a schmuck, I'm such a shithead, what an idiot. Now, what's going on here is unknown pain is migrating over to familiar pain and distraction. So familiar pain takes the shock out of it, takes the fear of the unknown out of it, which reduces the trauma. So you just broke my heart and it's unbearable. And I don't know what's happening next because I didn't see it coming and I'm devastated. I can't cope with reality because I can't make another bet because I desperately need certainty right now because I'm in so much shock. I desperately need certainty. There is way too much unknown going on here. I need certainty. I don't have it. Okay. So I'm going to take control by cutting myself. Now, cutters, for example, people who cut themselves periodically and regularly. So we're taking an unknown pain and we're putting it in a domain that is known. We're taking something that's out of control and we're taking control. And we're creating enough diversion to hold the ego in this domain where we feel safe. We feel safe because it's known and we're in control. So anything that's known where we're in control is not going to kill you. Why? Because we've cut ourselves before and we're still here. We've shamed and blamed ourselves before and we're still here. We've done it many times. I've called myself an idiot, a schmuck or whatever, 5,000 times. It's never killed me. Now, every single time I do that, it hurts because I'm shaming myself. I'm blaming myself. I'm criticizing myself. And it is that very pain that is necessary to pull the attention away from this terrifying pain that I am helpless and don't understand and am overwhelmed by and don't have control over. So I'm going to pull myself over here where I have pain that I do to myself. So we're moving from helpless to control, from unknown to known, to familiar. And what we're trying to do is de-escalate the trauma in a traumatically illiterate culture. Meaning in a traumatically literate culture, the sensations, the fight, flight, freeze, etc. would be known. There would be a cultural code. Trauma is such a devastating impact on a culture that to not have a universal finger sign that says this means I'm in trauma. And everyone in the room stops and gathers around and asks the most obvious and important question: how can we reduce the pain and the trauma that you're in right now? Everything stops. In an intelligent, trauma-literate culture, you have a sign that everyone understands. It needs to be a physical sign, because in many kinds of shock and trauma, you can't speak. Broca's area of the brain is shut down. There's no language. So you've got to have a sign. Now, an intelligent trauma-literate culture understands that trauma is viral. It is a devastating virus. It ripples out in all kinds of effects. If you don't respond to trauma within 5 minutes, you may have a lost job. You may have someone with PTSD. You may have someone who can't pay your loan back. Now, in a trauma-illiterate culture, we're too dumb to understand the ripple effects, and these ripple effects can go out for years afterwards, and we're too dumb to notice it. So we infect our culture, with all kinds of coping mechanisms and diseases and self-sabotage and punishment, and all manner of destruction ripples out from that event. But we don't pay any attention because we're too dumb to know. We don't track it. We don't ask our trauma survivors to calculate and give a national index. We don't do a census to say that, wow, $2 trillion went up in possible, probable economic potential because 5% of the population was dealing with active trauma, with poor coping skills, and then that rippled out to 15%. So 15% of the population is reeling from the effects of other people's coping mechanisms in a traumatically illiterate culture that adds up to trillions of dollars, and that collapses perhaps 40% of the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of the entire culture. Now, this is, to understand that 5 minutes of a room is all it takes to stop that, and that we're not going to do that, is so dumb and so ignorant that it is only an ignorant culture that is ignorant of its own ignorance that is capable of pulling that off. It's too cruel a joke for anything but a blind culture that's blind to its own blindness. A blind culture that's blind to its own self-hatred is the only kind of culture capable of pulling that kind of a stunt off. Because the data says that it is 10 times more efficient to arrest and stop a trauma becoming PTSD and regressed and stuff, rather than to move on. Because we set our people up to be dealing with this 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. We have individuals who have consumed 40% of their entire life force for a lifetime has been spent managing traumas with various addictions, with various coping mechanisms, with acting out, etc., etc. And, we just think, in our stupidity, we think we're saving time by not doing that. But we're saving time in the same kind of way that says, your arm is cut open, it's getting infected, but let's not take any time to, put on antiseptics and bandages and stuff because we're in a hurry. And so we're going to spill blood everywhere, of course. Only it's energetic and emotional blood. And then we're going to spew money over it because then we have to get drunk and do this and do that and, do all these various addictions in order to deal with the emotional blood that's being spilled. And then it gets infected. And then we become less reliable. And then when we become unreliable, other people, it's a domino effect. I don't pay my rent. And then suddenly my landlord has $4,000 less that month. So maybe someone that she's needing to pay doesn't get paid, and then so every one of these effects ripple out, And they ripple out for years until the issue gets addressed. And so we generally, as I say, in an emotionally, traumatically, relationally, and psychologically illiterate culture, we do dumb things. Little cut, we leave it undone, then the arm gets gangrene. When it gets really serious, we amputate the arm, and we pretend, isn't Western medicine wonderful, when a little bit of traumatic repair for 5 or 10 minutes could have stopped the entire cycle. And we have to use physical metaphors because we're a materialistic culture that patronizes and diminishes the inner, the invisible world of, one might call the outer the masculine, the inner the feminine. In a chauvinistic world, everything outer is important, but of course we're not sophisticated enough to understand that everything outer comes from within. And that the whole purpose of shaping the outer reality is to shape the inner reality. We all want to feel good, and we don't want to feel bad. Well, everything we do on the outside is aimed at that general direction, although we're too chauvinistic to acknowledge it. But it all gets down, whether it's ego strokes or avoiding fear, whatever. We all want to feel good, we don't want to feel bad. That's an inner state that we're working with indirectly by trying to create a reality that our culture tells us, if you create this reality where you're a billionaire and you've got the right breast size and you're the right weight, and then you're going to feel good and you're not going to feel bad, which only our billionaires are fortunate enough to understand is a lie, because everyone else gets to, isn't let in on the secret, that once I do this, I will feel good. But since very few people are billionaires with the perfect body and all that, it's only the billionaires with the perfect body who understand the joke, which is all these hundreds of millions of people are all trying to become like me, and I don't feel any better than, someone who hasn't even graduated, high school and didn't get a job and all that. Maybe they're even enjoying themselves because they didn't frantically rush to meet and hold on to this cultural dynamic. So unknown pain, familiar pain, and distraction. Now, if there was a drug that could make you that, feel that good without needing, it intensely, people will sometimes do that, and that becomes their addiction. Whether it's cocaine or heroin or something like that, which you could take at that time to feel good in a really intense way. But then you've got the addictive, the addiction of the substance. Now, the next thing is that as children, and then later as citizens, and later as employees, and later as students, we are in imperfect systems. There is not a single perfect parent. There is not a single perfect culture. There's not a single perfect school, single perfect teacher, single perfect partner. We exist in systems that are guaranteed to be imperfect. And in the intersection of that imperfection, there is pain. There is the longing for perfection. And there's the separation from the perfection. There's the desire and longing for parents that are attuned to us, to parents that put our safety and well-being above their addictions, to parents that know what we're feeling and put our emotional needs first, particularly when we don't have control over our emotions as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old. We don't know how to make the anger go away, but our parents could. Because when we're angry, it means that we're needing or wanting something and it's being blocked. But we can't fix that. We can't drive the car. We can't, go get the ice or whatever it is. We're 3 years old. And so there is natural aggression. I'm not happy with the way the world is. This is fucked up. I shouldn't be, made to be drunk just so that my mom can have another boyfriend over tonight and I'm 3 years old and I scream with all these strange auras around me, etc. And so, I'm speaking my needs, and mom knows that the guy is going to leave if she tends a baby, and so she puts a little vodka down my throat so I'll get passed out. That shouldn't be happening. It's not a perfect system. And there's pain. Now, the more sociopathic and the more psychologically illiterate the culture, the more the communication about the dissatisfaction with the system is met with a punitive punishment. Because intelligent cultures use pain signals and use, feedback of constricting emotions to perfect and get closer to a healthy system. Intelligent systems rely on pain from all sources and look to their sensitives, including their children, in order to have a message. Aha, we're not perfect here, and we're not perfect here, and we're not perfect here. And of course, what is the mature adult response? Is how can we take that feedback and be a little bit more perfect? A little bit better, and a little bit better, and a little bit better. So all feedback is gold to any responsible adult that wants to succeed. To succeed at what? The ultimate goal. To live in a world where people feel good more and more of the time and don't feel bad more and more of the time. To have an intelligent culture that creates more and more sustainable well-being per unit of energy invested. That's what responsibility is. I get the data. This is causing pain. This is causing pleasure. I make changes over here so that there's more pleasure. And I do that intelligently, without wasting that, drastic amounts of resources. And so that's intelligence. That's maturity. That's the essence of the human mission, so to speak. This journey of consciously becoming conscious of our reality and learning to relate to it in such a way that there is more and more sustainable well-being and less suffering. That's how you rank a culture or an individual's intelligence. So we don't have a tremendously intelligent culture. We have an abuse culture. And so, starting with the parenting, I don't like this thing. It's too hot. Shut up and put it in your mouth, or I'll send you to your room. We don't like negative feedback. We don't want to adjust it. Don't you talk to this. And so what we have is the kid does their part. We did our part to alert that there was some anomalies in the system. But we don't train parents on intelligence. You certainly don't learn it at school. We don't train people in intelligence. And so in that sense, the feedback becomes the enemy. It's kind of like we have smoke detectors, and nobody wants to hear them go off. But why do we have them? Because we understand that if we hear the smoke detector, go see where the smoke is from, and put out the fire, that it's much less painful than it is to hear the screech of the smoke detector, because it is painful. It's a horrible noise. These high-pitched whine is like, oh, it's so miserable. So why don't we just throw smoke detectors out? Tell them to shut up. Stop waking us up. Because we understand that if we don't listen to the feedback, it'll be much more painful later. Now, in an abuse culture, when pain is communicated, sometimes in a conscious abuse culture, that's the purpose. when you're dealing with bully psychology and sociopathic psychology, the goal is to hurt you. And so it's not a surprise, the fact that this hurts you, oh good, that hurts you, I'll do it some more. So this also, if you're in an abuse culture, the feedback that you give about what's hurting and not hurting is actually used to hone the weapon. Well, then you're in an abuse culture, the opposite of an intelligent culture. You're in a highly animalistic abuse culture in which the bullies and the abusers have been so indoctrinated in the sociopathic cult of suffering and so unable to resolve and extricate themselves from that suffering that they cannot believe it is even possible for them to stop suffering. The only thing they can believe in is the idea that they will not suffer alone, that they're going to bring other people into their level of suffering and so share a sense of belonging. In the positive, it's love and belonging, a shared joy. But in a sociopathic culture, the bully cannot rely on ever being indoctrinated or inducted into the joy club. Perhaps by the time they're 10 years old, they're so lost in the terror and trauma of their own physiology that they cannot even believe that they will ever feel real joy sustainably again. So their pleasure, the perverted sense of belonging, love and belonging, becomes pain and belonging. I don't know how to love and belong because there hasn't been a single grown-up able to induct me into that club. But I know exactly how I got inducted into the pain club, and I'll help you belong to my pain club. And so then, then of course that discourages feedback. You don't say, hey, that's hurting me, if the goal of the person you're with is to hurt you, because then they'll hurt you some more, and you want to feel good, and you don't want to feel bad. But we also have this phenomena of powerlessness. Many of the times the people who are hurting us, for example, when a parent is hurting a child, for the most part, that correlates to the parents feeling some degree of powerlessness. Now, rage is a response to powerlessness. I feel out of control and I feel rage, and I want to feel in control. I don't know how to clean all this up because I don't have any good modeling. They don't teach psychology in school. They don't teach relationship dynamics. They don't teach trauma repair. Anything useful, they haven't taught me. So the parent has grown up completely helpless to transform this helpless situation that they're in. But they know how to do what their parents did, which was terrify other people into silence. Well, then they feel powerful, or get out a gun and shoot someone. Very powerful feeling. I don't know how to feel good. I don't know how to get you to love me. But I can feel powerful in another way. I can kill you. I can do this. I can do that. I can make you all scared of me. And so there's this dynamic of, okay, I'm feeling powerless. How am I going to do that? I've got to do something I can do confidently, which is generally something that's modeled in the culture. Now, if the 5-year-old is giving feedback, no, I don't like this, no, I don't want to do that, no, I don't want to go to my room, it escalates the abuser's feeling of powerlessness. Because, the way their parents felt powerful was they'd, get out a club and beat them or do this or intimidate them or shame them until they would do what they were told. And then the parent gets a little hit of, I have control of something. I may not have control of my feelings. I may not have control of my life. But by God, I have control of a 5-year-old. I'll kill the fucker if he keeps doing this. And the rage may shock the child into silence or into, or I'm going to lock them in their room until they stop crying. In other words, I'm going to terrify them into tears, and then I will punish them until they stop crying. That's how powerful I am. And so what children learn in this dynamic, and it becomes an abuse contract, what they learn in this dynamic is that if they're small and the pain is coming to them from a bigger source that it is not safe to be honest, that it is not safe to speak out, that it is not safe to be aggressive, to defend healthy boundaries. Because, if mom's got the hots and she's learned the baby will sleep with a pill or, a shot of whiskey or something, and she's trying to get it in and the baby pushes it away, well, if mom is self-centered and absorbed enough, and narcissistic enough to be so focused on her date as to just knock a kid out with chemicals, she's also quite capable of prying the mouth open or slapping it until they open it to cry and then throwing the shot in. And they're like, I got what I wanted because I have superior force. I'm bigger than you. It's the first kind of awareness, often in a traumatically illiterate culture, through trauma. The self-absorption of a healthy child, which is healthily self-absorbed, every infant is self-absorbed in a healthy way, realizes that there's a giant that is an inner child that is just as immature as they are, but they've got a giant body and they've got smarts. They're self-centered, just like a child, but they've got giant bodies, and they know how to operate them. And so this contract then, it settles in as a pattern in the child that if I communicate your abuse to me, I will get abused some more. So what do? The child feels helpless and wants to do something to feel less helpless. So they try and attack their abuser, but that doesn't work. They get slapped down. They get made an item. That you can look at the bullying dynamics with Edward Snowden. We have Obama coming in promising to protect whistleblowers. And suddenly, under Obama's administration, Edward Snowden becomes the single most hunted man in America, breaking laws right and left to keep the abuse dynamic under wraps. Because he's shedding light on the shadow. Like, the surface, just like every good parent and family, we're all into democracy, we love you, this is all for you, it's all for the people, by the people, but in the shadow drain, we will kill anyone who sheds light on our shadow dynamics because we are way more determined to protecting our lies, our blind spots, than we are to truly empowering our culture, our country to actually see what's going on. Just like, parents will threaten to kill their kids if they let the neighbors know into some family secret. Why? Who cares? Why would you kill your family to protect a family secret? Wouldn't you save your family and sacrifice a family secret? No, it's a very interesting psychology of shame and abuse. And so the child needs to feel help empowered. So they start attacking the abuser. Then they get a systemic message that their life is in danger, that they will be traumatized for doing so. That's when they still want to feel empowered. But now they take the control and they take all that aggression that was supposed to defend their boundaries, their healthy boundaries, and they violate their own boundaries, identifying with the abuser, internalizing the abuse pattern by attacking themselves. So now every time they feel angry, that used to go out, they now do something violent to themselves. I'm such a shit. There's nothing wrong with mom. If I wasn't such a shit, she would love me. And so they add to whatever the abuse. If it's psychological abuse, they heap on psychological abuse. If it's physical abuse, they may heap on in a variety of ways. Crying excessively just to distract, or screaming or banging their head or whatever it is. Hitting. They will continue the abuse and escalate it as a way of moving from powerlessness to empowerment, because the aggression that was directed outwards led to more abuse, but the aggression that is directed towards the self leads to a cessation of the abuse. And so it's because the abuser is often looking for a message of power. And so this is happening here. Now, trauma that needs help, all trauma requires support. Why? It's the phenomenon of flooding. And we're going to watch what's happening here. You're not particularly threatened by this hand because you have context. And this is a simulation, but watch what happens as this hand becomes the entire screen. You see, you still can see outside of your screen. But what happens if that's all you can see? What trauma is at a very deep level, is it's a global see if we can get it back. See, we're stuck in trauma right now. This is all you can see. This is it. There's no distinction. It goes on forever, and it is devastating. It's devastating. I can't even get it to come back. And that's the process. It goes into lockdown mode. And it's like fear, pain, to the left, to the right. It's everywhere in your consciousness. What that means is you have no perspective. When that screen was all one color, all pain, all trauma, all dread, you have no perspective. That throws you into deep fight, flight, freeze, which is a state in our culture in which you are likely to do more damage than if you did nothing. That fight, flight, freeze, when you need to be healthily engaging and managing all the little dials in your life to keep it moving, is terrible. I mean, if you think of a juggler who's got 15 balls, up in the air at any given point, if you cover their whole reality so they see nothing but white light for 2 seconds, all of their balls fall down. Now, when that's keeping a job in place, your body in place, urinating, and all that, you've got hundreds of plates in the air, and all that collapses because you can't focus. This is a severe threat to survival. And you've lost perspective is the key. You've lost trust in yourself often because you're in shock and you realize you didn't see it coming. But you've also lost perspective, which means you desperately need other people who are not in that frozen overwhelm to guide you and know what's going on and say, you are in fact safe here. Trust me. I see outside of your trauma. You are not going to be murdered tonight. You will probably be humiliated again by your ex, and that's not going to kill you. You can get through that. You need someone outside of the overwhelm to guide you through, to get through and let the trauma calm down. If you do not have that, it becomes PTSD. Now, in a traumatically illiterate culture, you need help and you ask for help. And everyone is in a sociopathic state, certainly an ignorant state, and so they don't help or they're busy, focused on their own fears, etc. So you're stuck in that frozen place. Now, compulsive distraction of an addictive nature, whether it's cutting or pain, etc., takes your attention out of this frozen place and over here. I don't know how to deal with this, but I do know how to binge watch on Netflix. I don't know how to deal with this, but I know how to keep eating. I don't know how to deal with this, but I know how to do this. Compulsive, intense, distractive behavior takes the ego out of the traumatized area and gives it a breather from that terror and overwhelm. But at the same time, it makes us completely unable to function. So, it's a costly trade-off to be a traumatically illiterate culture. Now, we move to the next thing, because all of these things can work together simultaneously, or any one of these things can be going on. Now, fear of punishment in the certainty that we will be punished. Fear of pain, that suspense. You've probably been in a horror movie where, the idiot, right? You see the dark shape go into the basement. And so the idiot is what? Going to, go down half naked. Let's send a 5-year-old in the dark. Let's separate, right? Let's make sure that there's no possible way they could get help. And there'll be a creek down there, but they'll keep going down. They won't call the police and get backup or anything, because that would be intelligent. No. A 5-year-old little blonde blue girl, whatever, is going to go down and say, and as if, and when you understand the music has changed, it's inevitable. You know. I mean, it's like, get the fucking thing over it. Kill the bitch. Chop her up. Get rid of her. I don't want the suspense. Don't leave me waiting, another creek, and just get a move on. What's going on there in the psychology is all the cues in the movie have told you 5-year-old little innocent girl is going to be butchered, raped, strangled, terrified out of her wits. We all identify with the inner child, because our inner child has been what? Traumatized and terrified out of our wits repeatedly. The last thing we want to do is have our mirror neurons take us into the state of our own traumatized child vicariously through the movie figure. And we want to get it over with. And so we want to kill the little girl so that the suspense is over. Just get over with her. Sometimes we'll fast forward it. It's like, come on, get to the gruesome part where it's over with. And so that's what's going on there, where the fear and dread of self-punishment that we're out of control around often is met with a self-infliction, particularly if we believe we deserve it. It's like in our family system, anyone who lies and betrays the family has to be punished severely. And only after the reinitiation torment cycle has completed, which takes about 3 months, will you be invited to the family table again. But you're going to get dirty looks for 3 months and da-da-da-da-da. And some people, they can't deal with it. I can't bear being ostracized, whatever. And they'll get into a car accident. And then the family will all rush to the hospital because the car accident supersedes, the infidelity or whatever it was that they're all punishing. And so one way to break that dread and suspense is to inflict pain on oneself, or engage in some kind of an addictive, distracting behavior that will either take our mind off of the dread, but disable us. I mean, imagine being a stock trader where you need to study the daily market, but you have to binge watch Netflix because it's not exciting enough on the stock. And you just, blow your fund, etc. There's this energy of like, I've got to get it over with. It's too painful to anticipate. And so we move to a distraction that does not need help in response to trauma that needs help. And we move from fear of being punished by others to self-punishment. Particularly the kind of punishment, as I say, a car accident, stroke or something like that. It's like, when you say to your body, I will do anything to just get this over with. It's like, okay, you can fall down the stairs and break your arm. You can do this, and then you'll get sympathy. oh, thank heavens, I can't bear this, this ostracization and stuff. So that's, so again, but it's the form of empowerment. I can't wait helplessly for this terrifying dread of, the somber, I'm so disappointed in you, son, whatever it is. So I'm going to just do it myself. And parents often, play on this, etc., as part of their discipline training, etc., to try and, be silent. Do you know what you did? With the police. Do you know why I pulled you over? Isn't that your job? No, they want to get you to be in the suspense, as long as possible to draw it out. What speed were you going? Well, you've got the ray gun there. You were obviously in the impression is over. Why didn't you just tell me? No. Let's, what was your crime? How many beatings should I give you? Should I whip you with the belt twice or 3 times? And for some people in a sociopathic state, it's like whatever, they've numbed out completely. But to people, and children who need love and belonging and, desperately needing that, this whole thing is an absolute terror. And so some of them will bang their head on the ground or, get it over with, hit me more, to just get it over with. And so that's another expression of the need to go from pain and helplessness combined to pain and control in the self-punishment. The other dynamic around self-punishment or infliction of pain is similar around that suspense dynamic, and it comes from a belief. Let's say you're a Christian, and you believe that God will put you in a lake of fire for, breaking one of the 10 Commandments, whatever it is. So you believe that something you have done will be unimaginably punished, or punished to a degree that is traumatic for you. So you believe that it will happen. You may believe you deserve it. If you've defined God as a punishing son of a bitch who throws people in lakes of fire for eternity, it doesn't get much sicker than that, then you're expecting, you've believed in this punitive framework, so you're expecting, you've done the thing, you stole something, whatever the law was that you broke, and it varies. You can go to a silent retreat and you start talking. Well, everyone glares at you with hatred and, how do you get out of the silent retreat? You don't belong and all that. And it's like, oh, all I did is open my mouth. You can go to a sports game where it's like you're too quiet. It doesn't matter what the law is. When the system of thinking is such that says if you break this taboo, you cross this line, you are a bad person, and bad people need to be punished. So you believe that, so you must be punished. You see other people being punished. You punish other people and now you're doing it, so the logical thing is you need to be punished. In the paradigm of punishment and all that, and with that belief, if you don't punish someone, then all hell will break loose. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, the world won't function unless you have fear, pain, and punishment. And so someone has to be punished, and it has to be you. So you believe, which, when the punishment is severe, leads to dread. There's anticipation. I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be punished. This leads to self-inflicted pain to take control, to get relief. I'm going to be punished. Let me just punish myself. God, you don't have to punish me. I've ruined my own life is kind of the theory here. So self-inflicted pain releases the charge. I deserve punishment for crossing this line. I have crossed this line. I will be punished. But I've already taken care of it. I've already blown all my money, etc. You can't take anything else from me. And some people will literally destroy their whole lives so that someone else can't take anything from them. Some people will not make any money so that the government can't seize it or no one can steal it. It's like, I know I deserve to be punished enough, but I'm not going to give you the chance. I'm not going to create anything valuable in my life to begin with. because I don't want to face the helplessness, because I know it'll be taken because I'm a bad person and bad people deserve to be punished. So we've got a prison of belief. Now, when the punishment is done, the cutting is done, cutters feel a great relief. Oh, thank heavens. It's over with. I did it. The pain doesn't get that much worse than this. I've cut my own self with a knife. I've bled. I can handle anything, and there's a great relief. It's like I'm good to go. I can sin again, and then I'll just cut myself again. So you get a release, and with the release, you get the illusion and the sense of control, and you also get a certain sense of sanity. Because some of our beliefs create incredible psychological stress and thing. Because let's say we had a crazy mother that said you're a bad person if you masturbate. Well, crazy mothers have been saying that for hundreds of years in certain cults. Certain cults have crazy mothers that say things like that. So you're going to get in trouble if you masturbate. Well, you masturbate. There's nothing wrong with you masturbating. But you've internalized all the terror and guilt and shame of your mother saying that you would be punished. So now you need to be punished. Oh, when's it going to happen? Where's it going to happen? Is God going to hit me? Is my mother going to... Who's going to... Where's it going to... And you believe it will happen. But it's not happening. Why? Because who the hell would want to punish you for making a part of your body feel more pleasurable? It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It's not happening. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It was not happening. Okay, I'm going to do it myself. I don't, and that pain gets registered in the brain. This is my punishment. Now I'm doing it to myself to get it over with. But it's now done. I have paid my dues. And this is where the sense of, in the framework of punishment and pain, in the paradigm of punishment and pain, Joe Blow steals $100,000 from embezzles $100,000 from the retirement account of so-and-so, and he goes and spends it. Well, they don't get their money back. He gets caught. He's locked up for 10 years. The taxpayer pays $1 million to lock him up for 10 years. So now the taxpayer's out $1 million. Betty is out her $100,000. Joe Blow hasn't been able to contribute the $100,000 back because he's locked up in a concrete box. So it's a completely absurd thing. If he spent 10 years donating $15,000 a year of his paycheck to Betty, that would actually give her the money back. But it doesn't fit our idea of punishment and original sin and all that. And so we'd rather have the taxpayer pay $1 million to lock him up for 10 years. But we've all agreed that after he suffered enough, well, you've paid your dues, meaning you hurt so-and-so, and so we're going to hurt you even more. And then you're all right again. And it's the same kind of abuse contract with mom and dad. You drove the car without asking. But we took away all your pleasure in life. We humiliated you. We separated you from your friend. You couldn't watch television. We gave you a whipping. You got suspended from school. You had to make a public apology. And so you've suffered enough. Now, we've all had to work hard to make sure that you stay in your room. We've had to feed you and do this, but that's fine. It's the same concept as the government paying $1 million of our money to punish someone for stealing $100,000. Because, that's what? That's a paradigm. It's a punishment paradigm. Within the punishment paradigm, where punishment will happen, because it starts up at the top. God's a fucked up punishing dude. You look at another God, he'll throw you in a lake of fire. You don't do what you're told, throw you in a lake of fire. You're not willing to cut your son in half, That's how God's gang works. He tells his followers, I need you to cut your boy in half. Okay, God, you got it. Up! You've proved your loyalty. You were willing to murder your child for me. So you don't need to cut your son in half. I was just testing you. Am I a member of your gang now, God? Yes, you are. Well, this is the kind of people we want. Sociopathic butchers who will kill their parents at a drop of a hat for some fucked up inner voice that calls themselves God. Well, that's the cult that we live in. And so this deep sense of punishment, and even, so much of the tribal, mysticism and mythology, with the Thor was an angry god, lightning was a hammer to what? Kill people, start fires, There was jealousy and wrath and all this stuff. This is all the projection of the traumatizing and abusive parent onto the larger deity, because that's how parents look to a 5-year-old, to a 2-year-old. So when they grow up, they remember that, and now their parents don't look that big, but now God is a much bigger parent, and just this, this endless projection. And so if you know you're going to be punished, you want to get it over with. So in summary, we have moving helplessness to control, moving unknown to familiar and known, moving aggression towards the abuser that is violating boundaries, towards aggression towards the self. We have trauma that needs help but doesn't get it, that gets moved to compulsive behavior that doesn't need help but that distracts us from that which needs help and gives us a sense of agency. We have the dread and suspense of expecting to be punished that we want to get over with by punishing ourselves. And we have even when we're not, even when we're alone, even when mom isn't there, we left the house. So yes, she would have punished us every single time. And if we could just cut ourselves, like this was the kid, so many genius little kids, the vase broke down. Oh my gosh, I am going to be hit and yelled at. It'd be much less painful if I just cut myself a few times and lay on the floor and say, and then maybe she won't kick me for the vase. She'll rush me to the hospital or something. And thank goodness, the trauma of the protector provider hating me and yelling and kicking and screaming at me and shaming me for 30 minutes, I'd much rather cut myself. And so let's just get it over with. But even when that's not there, when we believe the internalized pattern that our parents told us over and over again with their behavior, you're not worth it, you deserve to be punished, you're bad. And sometimes if we're shocked and don't know who we are, you're shocked, it's like, who am I? I'm the bad one. We go to our strongest emotions, and some of our strongest emotions are traumatic identities. We go to the part, we ground to the most intense feelings of our lives, which are often shame and trauma in a traumatically illiterate culture. And when we expect, when we believe in a number of things, if you believe rich people are jerks and you're making some money, it's going to make you incredibly uncomfortable because now you believe that you're a jerk. Well, then you're going to go to your next paradigm. What do we do with jerks in this culture? We punish them. So now you believe you're a jerk and you're going to be punished. And we say, well, what if I do the old trick of I'll punish myself first and I'll feel guilty and I'll apologize and I won't enjoy the money and stuff. Then can I keep it? Then can I be rich? Okay, fine. As long as you whine and moan and get sick and nearly die of cancer, then you can keep your money and not be a rich jerk, and your friends will say, well, normally rich people are jerk, but you've suffered so much, you deserve it. And so it's like, oh my goodness, I get to keep my friends, I get to be successful, and I'll just give myself cancer and do this and that, and then I won't be a bad person anymore. And so belief can create extraordinary psychological pressure that when the punisher doesn't come from the outside to smite us, that we just do it to ourselves to get it over with. And so this is the psychology of self-punishment. And the psychology of self-punishment is almost always the psychology of a child and of an adolescent that has not thought the system through, that doesn't understand intelligence, that's going along with the culture of ignorance and fear. But as a regressed child, we cannot change these patterns. Only with the help of some part bigger than the child, only with the help of an adult, which is very difficult, of course, if both of your parents were children. You don't have the modeling. When your teachers were children, you don't have the modeling. It's very difficult. But an adult is someone who protects the child, who protects the innocent, who protects the adolescent, who listens and understands the adolescent, who protects and comforts the trauma survivor in the room, so that this programming can be let go, so that they can return to their own template of adult, and the disease is healed. And the culture is that's what an adult does. If you want to know if there's any adults in the room when trauma is going on, the adult is the one. Whether the trauma is inside them or inside someone nearby, the adult is the one who responds to trauma. Now, in a culture of children, in a culture of child-parent projection where there is very little adulthood, there's a lot of old grown-ups, old children, a lot of ignorance, a lot of fear, a lot of unconsciousness, but not a lot of responsible adults. In the absence of that, the individual, the child, the adolescent in a regressed place will self-inflict pain in a variety of ways to gain agency, to escape the dread, to distract from trauma, and to get through it. And it will appear like self-sabotage, and it'll appear like they're their worst enemy. Why do you have to cut yourself? Isn't it bad enough your partner just left you? Do you have to heap it on? Yes. The data is overwhelming. Until there is certainty of loving adult support for the wounded child, then these coping mechanisms will continue. And if we understand them, we will not shame people who cut themselves and people who abuse themselves. We will heal their terror, their trauma, and their confusion, the brainwashed confusion of a child growing up in an abuse culture, surrounded by abuse, who when they go into extraordinary pain and no one responds to protect them, understand that this mechanism of self-punishment got them through high school, whatever is alive, and maybe it'll keep them alive again today. Knowing this and understanding this can literally lift people into an entirely new probability field, because it just takes one adult. It just takes one adult. I learned this the hard way when there wasn't an adult who would stand for me, and I started punishing myself in response to overwhelming psychological abuse induced by my therapist. Sexual abuse under various things. And I got to witness this on the inside. I got to study and ask which parts of me were doing what for what reasons. And even when I knew this very clearly, when I was in 8, 9, 10 pain, psychologically and physically, and no one would put that pain first, when I couldn't and no one else would, maybe they couldn't either. That's the problem with this, abuse culture. I would watch myself hurt myself and be grateful for the relief that it would give me, as it distracted me from a hurt that was happening to me, but that I couldn't stop in any way that I knew how. And when I met my wife, I saw her doing the same thing. And I measured all of the different pains and helplessnesses in her life. And every time she needed to hurt herself, I understood that that is a measure of the amount of pain that she was not helped to deal with. And when I could not get the help to deal with my own pain, my distraction, my healthiest distraction, was saying, not on my watch. I may not be able to stop this pain in me, but I can stop it in her. And the intensity of caring, was strong enough for her to distract me from my own pain. And so I would pivot away from my own addictions and stuff towards advocating for her. And that was ultimately my salvation out of this loop. Was I have found generally that what I can do for someone else, I can then internalize. I can teach people to do it for me, but if they're not willing, then I'm in helplessness. But I can also do something for others that I can't do directly for myself. But once I've done it for another, I can watch what I did for them and watch the results, and then I can internalize it. But someone needs to set the template. And if no one will set it for me, then I need to set that a template going out, which means that someone has to do me the enormous honor of receiving my love, of receiving my gifts. If they will not receive my gifts, and they will not give the gifts that I need, I'm stuck. If no adult has modeled sacrifice, protection, the truth. Because that's the other thing with the reason this is so difficult to bring back to consciousness. I mean, it's perfectly common sense. You probably grasped almost all of it immediately and intuitively. So why hasn't this been spoken to you? Why did no one tell me this? Well, every abuser feels shame and guilt for, the barbarity of dominating and destroying a child's life in this way. This is every parent's worst nightmare. And so one of the things that goes on, and it went on, rampantly in my New Age household, is that this whole pattern would play out in various ways with every sibling. But then the parents needed to feel good about themselves. And so they would create a fake version of reality in which they were these wonderful hero parents who hadn't been cowardly and done these things. And they would deny all reality to any of this, and they would punish voicing of this. And then they would praise and bribe those who pretended it didn't happen. And they would look over it. And none of the other grown-ups around had any interest in breaking that burial pattern. So these things got buried, 60, 70 layers of soil on top of them, with the parent not giving language to this dynamic. And it was very clear that the parents were terrified and horrified with this information coming to light. So by voicing it, the child knows that I'm terrifying and horrifying my parents. He doesn't want to terrify and horrify them. He wants to be loved. Mom and Dad, what do I have to do to be loved? Well, you have to be buried. You have to be suffocated with 60 layers of soil, in which your burial never happened because that part of you that we're burying, it never existed to begin with. That's how deep you need to bury it. And if you will pull that off, you can be part of this family. But if the corpse comes to the surface that we murdered and put down there, you will not belong, because we cannot accept ourselves for doing this. We cannot, in the same breath, accept you for telling us that we did it. And so in the ultimate cowardice, the abuser that cannot forgive themselves for the abuse ostracizes and punishes any message of the abuse, which drives the survivor insane into a sociopathic numbness, where then the abuse pattern continues. When you understand this pattern and look for the efforts, and you understand that people lie to survive, that when you say, what's wrong, they say, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. Well, you have to be blind, dumb, as well as culturally normal in order to look at that face and know that that's not a lie. And not get the obvious truth that this is being covered out of a terror of being punished. Well, I've seen this face on so many of my lovers in this country. 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old women, terrified of the truth coming out, desperately looking at me. What do I have to say, Dane, so that you'll love me and you won't do this? Because they're not looking from 50 years old eyes. They're looking at a 3-year-old. They see that I'm impatient about something or irritated. And the 3-year-old is going back like, what's mom and dad so terrified of coming? Oh, they're terrified of the abuse coming out, so I'll cover up for you. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Just don't leave me. The child's deepest terror. Don't leave me. Because to an infant, that is death. That is failing to meet every human need. When you die, there's no survival, there's no security of that survival, there's no love and belonging, there's no self-esteem, there's no self-development. You're dead. And this is the torture and terror of our cult in leaving people for a lifetime with these open wounds that can be triggered whenever there is meaningful heart connection. Whenever there's meaningful heart connection, hopefully love, all of the unconscious and unmet parts of the psyche want to come forward, to be seen, to be loved. Thank goodness, are you the one that will love me and let me out of this dark pit? Because that psyche that's buried 60 layers of soil underneath is not dead. It is laying there because the psyche doesn't die. It is laying there, understanding that its protectors and providers, including you, are so terrified of its existence and what it portends, the changes that it implies, the unknown that will be born out of that change. And in a traumatized culture, you can measure the level of unrecognized and unhealed trauma in a culture by how terrified it is of the unknown. The unknown is neutral. In 1,000 years, there is nothing that is familiar to you here that will not be considered barbaric. Because it is. There are no perfect systems. We look back 500 years ago and say, leeches? Eating quack this thing and, potatoes for... the whole thing is disgusting. People washing their own laundry endlessly, teeth rotting out. It's disgusting. It's barbaric. The Spanish Inquisition, raping native women, stealing... It's completely barbaric. And that's as it should be in an evolving cultural dynamic that is evolving rather than devolving. One looks with horror at what was done 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, every single thing we're doing will be an abomination, and that's as it should be. We are so afraid of seeing that abomination and not being able to respond to it This is the hostility towards truth, the hostility towards being seen in our inadequacy to respond. Because if we begin to grasp this, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? I'm a horrible parent. I'm a this and that. It's how do we respond to that and not place that, that burden on our children, in this perpetual cycle of ignorance, is a really big deal. And with my wife in this dynamic, of course, I was hyper aware of every area that I was abusive. Because you cannot see the areas you were abused without simultaneously seeing the areas you are abusive. I mean, they're the same set of lenses. So if you see one, you see the other. And that's, of course, the big digestion. If you want to grow and evolve, you have to see your own faults. If you see your own faults, you will see other people's faults. The tyranny and the sadness of the cowardice of our grown-ups to see their own patterns is that when they say to the child, I will not love you, I will not accept you unless you bury my inadequacies and never see them, never think them, never talk about them, because I, as the grown-up, can't deal with the truth. And you are terrifying and threatening to me if you are a bringer of truth. When we say that to a child, the child is getting their information about what's scary and what's good and bad from the grown-ups. And the child can literally grow up believing that their inner reality, the data of their various abuses and interactions and stuff, is more dangerous than complete ignorance and lies, and will work loyally for the system, trying to cover everything up so that they will not be hated, so they will not be thrown out, cast out, and shamed in a sick cultural dynamic. The greatest courage, and what I aspired to give my wife in probably more than 1,000 apologies, is to acknowledge it, to say, look, I am doing addictive and destructive behavior right now because I can't manage my own pain, not because you're doing anything wrong. I have rages because I feel so helpless, not because you're doing anything wrong. And I criticize you because I am expecting endless suffering to be hurled at me in the form of merciless criticism by two child parents who don't know how to love. And I don't want to be all alone and just caught in that. And so I throw it out at you. And there's a release. And that's not your fault. And I'm sorry. And all the abuse that was given to you is not your fault. And it was interesting with my wife because she had, of course, learned from her parents that she should blame herself for her parents abusing her. That's the way the guilt is lifted from the abuser. They not only want to abuse you, but then they feel guilty, so they want you to convince them, convincingly, that it's your fault. And this is the abused woman dynamic, where it's like, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have looked at you, I'm so sorry I looked at you. Of course you had to hit me, I looked at you, and it wasn't the right time of day to look at you. And so there's this terror, just don't leave me. Don't leave me. In the terror of traumatized child, afraid of being hated. Not able to care for myself, of course, because I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with the world. I'm a regressed 3-year-old. And so, that was actually the only times that I would really fight with my wife. Would be when I'd apologize for an obvious gap. Like, I'd like to be this person, I'm being this person. I'm coping with extraordinary pain that shocked me into the... And she would try and pretend that it was her fault. Just like I tried to pretend that it was my fault to make my parents feel better. It really helped me understand how terrified children are, that they will literally go insane to make their parents feel more comfortable in the abuse cycle. Oh, it wasn't anything. I'm just scared out of my wits as a 3-year-old, but it was nothing. No big deal. You were just doing your best. No, it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So yeah, the only times I'd have to fight her is saying, no, don't steal my sanity again by pretending that if I abuse you, it's your fault. I get that your parents were too sick to tell you the truth about that. But that's the least I can give you, is complete candor about what is and is where. This is optimal health. And here's where I was here, and here's where I was here, and here's where I was here, and then here's where I was here. But, most of the time there's a gap between me and optimal health here, and that's not your fault. You're comfortable with it, obviously. You're very comfortable with it because I fit into what you're expecting, what you believe you deserve. But that in itself is a crime, that you were taught that by parents too unconscious to examine the abuses given to them. And my parents were at least 30% better than their parents. That's an incredible iteration, to be a 30% better parent in one generation than the parent before. It's just that their parents were so hideous that 30% better was still hideous, just not so hideous. And, and what I pass on from that is ugly. It's just not quite so hideous. It's very, very sad. But this iteration process can happen 10 times, 20 times faster in a lifetime when we're in a cult that tells the truth, that understands what the lines are. This is optimal. This is a coping mechanism. Yes, it's the best I can do in a sick culture in this environment, but it's still a coping mechanism. Let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. And let's be honest that these deep intergenerational patterns, drilled down from 1,000 different angles, piled on and buried beneath 10,000 shovelfuls, they're not going to just vanish unless we do our personal work to find those in the world that are willing to see and be seen. To understand that it's also not personal. There's nothing innately bad about me or you. It's this cycle of context. It's this imperfect system that we find ourselves in that produces pain and then produces painful ways of managing the pain as we awaken through pain, through the dignity of truth, to a better way of doing things. Namaste.